In the sultry heat of the deep south, where magnolias bloomed and secrets festered like wounds, white women moved through their days with a peculiar blend of privilege and constraint. They were the delicate flowers of the plantation, their porcelain skin a stark contrast to the sun-kissed fields where black slaves toiled. But beneath those lace-trimmed dresses and genteel smiles, a tempest brewed, a tempest fueled by power, desire, and the twisted dance of ownership. Mixed-race children, those ethereal beings who straddled the line between two worlds, stirred the air like whispers. Their fair complexions betrayed the forbidden unions that had taken place in the shadowed corners of the plantation. White women, their eyes wide with confusion, wondered how this could be. After all, they knew the rules. The offspring of black male and female slaves were to be black, bound by the chains of their lineage. But these children, with their honeyed skin and tangled curls, defied the expected script. And so the truth unfurled like Spanish moss in the moonlight. The white husbands, masters of the land and lords of the lash, had not been content with their black female slaves alone. No, they had sought solace, or perhaps conquest, in the arms of those women who bore the weight of their desires. Threats and fear had been their tools, and the black women's bodies their property. They could do anything with them, and they did. But the white wives? They harbored secrets too. They watched their husbands wield their power, their rage, and their lust. And in the quiet hours, when the fireflies danced and the cicadas sang, these women plotted their own retribution. For white women owned slaves too, mostly black men who labored under the sun. And what wicked thoughts swirled in their minds? What horrific acts did they contemplate to shame their husbands, to turn the tables on the very institution that bound them all? The answer lies in the dusty pages of history, obscured by the weight of embarrassment that still clings to white men's souls. You see, white women were not mere spectators in the grand theatre of slavery. They were players, their roles more complex than society cared to admit. They bought and sold, owned and bartered, their influence growing with each shackle they fastened. The more slaves a woman possessed, the tighter her grip on the world around her. Land might slip through her fingers after marriage, but slaves, those living, breathing commodities, remained hers. Before the Civil War, white women's freedoms were as fragile as spun glass. Denied the right to vote, they became extensions of their husband's authority, their mobility curtailed, their freedom a distant memory. Abuse became the currency of control, and yet they were expected to wear their obedience like a silken gown. Cheerful, loyal, and obedient, the trifecta of virtues that masked the turmoil within. But for some, slavery offered a twisted sense of power. White women, their eyes glittering with autonomy, owned multiple slaves to maintain their social standing. Legal battles raged in courtrooms where the belief that slavery equated to freedom tilted the scales in their favor. Historians once downplayed their role, but recent research has illuminated the truth. Accounts collected from the depths of time reveal that white girls imbibed the art of ownership from an early age. They learned to control, to manipulate, to safeguard their wealth against the whims of future husbands. As they matured, these women ascended to positions of authority. Their elevated status granted them dominion over black lives, and they wielded it with cunning. Verbal barbs, physical exploitation, the tools of their trade. Southern households mirrored the hierarchical structure of slave society, and white girls watched, absorbed, and mimicked. Their actions echoed through generations, perpetuating the cycle of bondage. And so, in the hush of history, we find them: Lizzie, Anab, Burwell, names etched in sepia tones. A 3-year-old demanding her father harm a black slave. New maids bestowed upon daughters like twisted dowries. The legacy of white women, both whispered and shouted, a tapestry woven with threads of power, desire, and shame. In the shadow of the law's cold hand, married women were once invisible as property holders, their identities submerged beneath their husband's rule. Yet these women, cloaked in societal constraints, found cunning ways to claim dominion over lands and legacies. They wove their influence through prenuptial promises and legal loopholes like trust deeds and gifts, and in Louisiana's unique landscape, they carved out separate estates should their spouses falter in fiscal wisdom. The antebellum South was a land of contradictions, where patriarchal reigns coexisted with a secret empowerment of white women. They navigated the covetous chains, finding paths to power that let them grasp the reins over properties and, by extension, the lives they bound in servitude. The era spun tales of white women as porcelain figures, shielded within their homes from the world's cruel truths. Yet, whispers from the past refute this image, unveiling their active roles in the grim commerce of human lives. From the comfort of parlors, they bartered for souls, shaping a niche for enslaved caretakers of their children. These women, especially those wearied by childbirth's relentless cycle, saw in enslaved women not just help, but a respite. Their status afforded them the liberty to hire, borrow, or own these wet nurses, granting them leisure while others nurtured their infants. But let it not be forgotten that not all hands offered kindness. Some wielded cruelty that cried out for their husband's intervention. Wealthy women saw in the enslaved not just labor, but a means to multiply their human chattel. They coerced and cajoled, bending black men to their will, their actions a dark mirror to the power plays of their male counterparts. These forced unions, draped in the guise of control and desire, were far from consensual, rooted in a vile imbalance of power. Yet, there's a bitter irony to note. Slaves, deemed less than human, forbidden from the touch of their white masters, found themselves exceptions to this rule at the whims of white women's desires. These women, driven by longing or loneliness, crossed lines society dared not acknowledge, finding solace or dominance in the arms they claimed as their own. These clandestine bonds, some hidden away in secret chambers, others brazenly displayed, were all marred by the stain of exploitation. They stand as stark reminders of a time when one's humanity could be overshadowed by another's whim, a legacy of pain that echoes through history. The narrative of the passive white woman is shattered by accounts of those who wielded their power with a cruel hand, forcing black men into unspeakable acts. Harriet Jacobs' harrowing words paint a vivid portrait of this abuse, a testament to the predatory nature of such exploitation. These mistresses of the plantation, bound by their own gilded cages, turn to the strong arms of black men not just for pleasure, but as silent rebellion against their own confines. In their loneliness, they found a twisted form of freedom, a way to assert their existence in a world that sought to erase their agency. This retelling does not seek to excuse, but to expose the complexities of a time when the lines between oppressor and oppressed were blurred by the intimate tyranny of the bedroom, a chapter in our history that must be acknowledged and learned from, lest its shadows reach out to darken our present. In the quiet aftermath of the Civil War, a subtle battle waged on. White women, grappling with a new world order, sought to shape it by reaching out to the newly freed African Americans. They offered a hand, not in solidarity, but as a ploy to maintain the old hierarchies under a new guise: apprenticeship. This system, cloaked in the promise of progress, was but a shadow of freedom. The young, whose skin bore the sun's kiss, found themselves bound to familiar faces, their wages a pittance, their servitude masked as mentorship. These apprentices, in a cruel twist of fate, toiled for the very souls who once claimed ownership over them. It was a change, yes, but one that barely disturbed the surface of their lives. Why did these women cling to such measures? Was it a desperate grasp for authority, a way to assert dominance in a world that had shifted beneath their feet? Or perhaps it was a more intimate pursuit, a search for something their partners could not provide, found instead in the forbidden embrace of those they enslaved. Join us as we continue to uncover the obscured narratives of the past. We invite your thoughts and reflections. Can you still perceive the remnants of these historical practices in today's world? If our exploration into the depths of Black history has touched you, consider lending your support. Hit the subscribe button for History Bizarre, activate the notification bell and dive into our collection of captivating tales. Let's unite in keeping this vital dialogue ongoing.